The train leaves the Hong Kong border and enters Shenzhen, China, and I feel different. I can feel the skin on my forehead tingling, my blood rushing through a new course, my bones aching with the familiar old pain. I think my mother was right. I am becoming Chinese. Whether I agree or not, once you're born in Chinese, you cannot help but feel and think Chinese. We're going to Guangzhou, my 72-year-old father Canning Wu and I, where we can visit his aunt whom he has not seen since he was 10 years old. On the train to Guangzhou, Jing made things to herself. After Guangzhou, we will catch a plane to Shanghai. I will meet my two half-sisters for the very first time. They're my mother's twin daughters from her first marriage. Little baby she was forced to abandon on the road as she was fleeing Quiblin for Chongqing in 1944. That was all my mothers had told me about these daughters, so they had remained babies in my mind. A letter came from Shanghai addressed to my mother. When I first heard about this, that they were alive, I imagined my identical sisters transforming from little babies into 6-year-old girls.
Dearest Mama, we are alive.
Come get us, please, hurry. I did not know that my mother had died 3 months before. My father was the one who opened the long letter and they called her Mama. They never resented her and kept her framed photo. They told her about their life from when they were left on the side of the road to when they were found. My father was heartbroken and gave the letter to my mother's old friend, Auntie Lindo. He couldn't bear the thought of telling them that my mother was dead, so he asked Auntie Lindo to write to them saying my mother had passed away. Instead, Auntie Lindo took the letter to the Joy Luck Club, and with the help of my mother's other friends, she decided to write back to my sister saying,
Dearest daughters, I too have never forgotten you in my memory or in my heart. I never give up hope that we would see each other again in a joyous reunion. I am only sorry that it's been so long. I want to tell you everything about my life since I last saw you. I want to tell you this when our family comes to see you in China.
I signed it with my mother's name.
They'll think she's coming then.
And I had imagined my sisters now being 10 or 11, holding hands, excited that their mother was coming, whereas my mother was dead.
How can you say she's not coming in a letter? She is your mother. She is their mother. You must be the one to tell them. All these years they have been dreaming of her.
I thought she was right. And my sisters at the airport. They would be standing on their tiptoes, looking anxiously, scanning from one dark head to another as we got off the plane, and I would recognize them instantly, their faces with identical worried look.
Sister, we are here.
Where is Mama? Is she hiding?
Sisters, I'm sorry. I have come alone.
And before I could tell them, they could see it in my face. They were wailing as they ran away from me, and then I saw myself getting back on the plane and coming home. After I dreamed this scene many times, watching their despair turn from horror into anger, I begged Auntie Lindo to write another letter. At first, she refused.
How can I say she's dead? I cannot write this. But it's cruel to have them believe that she's coming on a plane. When they see me, they'll hate me. Hate you? Cannot be. You are their own sister, their only family. You don't understand. They'll think I'm responsible that she died because I didn't appreciate her.
Auntie Linda looked satisfied. She sat down for an hour, and when she stood up, she handed me a 2-page letter.
Thank you.
Coming back to present day. Before the train even comes to a stop, people are bringing down their belongings from above their seats. I am China, I remind myself, and somehow the crowds don't bother me. It feels right. I start pushing too. I take out my passport, who it says at the top, below that June May, who was born in California, USA. I wonder if the customs people will question whether I'm the same person as in the passport photo.
Even without makeup, she could never pass for true Chinese. She stands 5'6" and her head pokes above the crowd so that she is eye level only with other tourists. Her mother once told her height came from her grandfather. This is what her grandmother told her, but now it's too late to ask. They are all dead. They were all killed in the war when a bomb fell on their house. Confused, Jin Mei asked if maybe her family had escaped. Angrily, her mother denied. Her mother explained she saw the house thrown off its foundation. She saw a bed someone used to sleep in. metal frame twisted up at one corner, and a book. She found her doll with her hands and legs broken, her hair burned off. She gave that doll to her niece. She would cry if that doll was not with her always. She was in the house with that doll. Her parents were there, so everybody was there, waiting together, because that's how her family was.
Soon my father and I find ourselves in a large area filled with thousands of people in suitcases. I feel lost and my father looks helpless.
Soyen.
An old woman is holding up a pink plastic bag filled with trinkets. I guess she's trying to sell us something. My father is staring down at this tiny woman. His eyes widen and he smiles like a pleased little boy.
Ayi, auntie. Soyen.
I just think it's funny. She had just called my father little wild goose. They clasp each other's hands. They do not hug and hold on like this. They're both crying openly, laughing at the same time. It's only then that I remember the camera. I had meant to take a picture of my father and his aunt the moment they met. It's not too late.
Here, stand together over here.
The camera flashes and I hand him the snapshot. Ai and my father still stand close, watching as their image begins to form. Ai is only 5 years older than my father, which makes her around 77. Her thin hair is pure white, her teeth are brown with decay. So much for Chinese women looking young forever, I think to myself. In the taxi, Ai talks nonstop, so I have no chance to ask her about the different sites we're passing by.
You wrote and said you would come only for one day. One day? How can you see your family in one day? And this idea to call us when you arrive? This is nonsense. We have no telephone. I was so beside myself as my son almost turned heaven and earth upside down trying to think of a way. So we decided the best was for us to take the bus from Toshan and come to Wanzhou. Meet you right from the start.
I am holding my breath as the taxi driver dodges between trucks and buses. We seem to be on some sort of long freeway overpass, like a bridge above the city. I can see row after row of apartments, each floor cluttered with laundry hanging out to dry. A public bus with people jammed in so tight their faces are nearly wedged against the window. Men and women are standing on narrow platforms, scraping the sides, working without safety straps or helmets. Oh, would Usher have a field day here, I think. Taxi stops, and I assume we've arrived. I peer out at what looks like a grander version of the Hyatt Residency.
This is communist China? We must have the wrong hotel.
I had explicitly instructed my travel agent to choose something inexpensive, but there it says out in the itinerary, Garden Hotel, Wanchi Donglu. The hotel is magnificent. Rather than be impressed, I am worried about the expense, as well as the appearance it must give AI that we rich Americans cannot be without our luxuries even for one night. I was sheepish, and AI and the others seem delighted by our temporary surroundings. Our whole family crowds into one elevator. As soon as the elevator door shuts, everybody talks at once in what sounds like relieved voices. I have the feeling AI and the others have never been in such a long elevator ride. Our rooms are next to each other and are identical. Kind of built-in wet bar with a small refrigerator, stocked with Heineken beer, Coke Classic, and 7-Up. Many bottles of Johnny Walker Red, Bacardi rum, and Smirnoff vodka, and packets of M&Ms, honey roasted cashews, and Cadbury chocolate bars. And again, I say out loud,
This is communist China?
my father comes into my room.
They decided we should just stay here and visit. They say, less trouble that way, more time to talk.
What about dinner?
I've been envisioning my first real Chinese feast for many days already. A big banquet with one of those soups steaming out of a carved winter melon, chicken wrapped in clay, and Peking ducks. My father walks over and picks up a room service book. He flips through the pages quickly, then points to the menu.
This is what they want.
It's decided. We're going to dine tonight in our rooms with our family, sharing hamburgers, french fries, and apple pie a la mode. Later, AI and her family are browsing the shops while we clean up. After a hot ride on the train, I'm eager for a shower and cooler clothes. The hotel provided little packets of shampoo, which upon opening I discovered it is the consistency and color of hoisin sauce. This is more like it, I think. This is China. I realize this is the first time I've been myself in what seems like days. But instead of feeling relieved, I feel forlorn. I think about what my mother said about activating my genes and becoming Chinese, and I wonder what she meant. 1 o'clock in the morning, I awake to tapping sounds on the window. I'm sitting on the floor, leaning against one of the twin beds, and see my father is staring out the window, tapping his fingers on the glass.
Fuyan didn't tell me she was trying all these years to find her daughters. Naturally, I did not discuss her daughters with her. I thought she was ashamed she had left them behind.
Where did she leave them? How were they found?
It just happened when the Japanese took over Guilin.
Japanese in Guilin? That was never the case. Couldn't be. The Japanese never came to Guilin.
Yes, that was what the newspapers reported. I know this because I was working for the news bureau at the time. The Kuomintang often told us what we could say and what we could not say, but we knew the Japanese had come into the province. We had sources who told us they captured the Wuchang Railway, how they were marching over land, making very fast progress, marching towards the province capital, Guilin.
If people did not know this, how could Su Yuan know the Japanese were coming?
An officer of the Kuomintang secretly warned her. Su Yan's husband also was an officer, and everybody knew that officers and their families would be the first to be killed. So she gathered a few possessions. In the middle of the night, she picked up her daughters and fled on foot. The babies were not even 1 year old.
How could she give up those babies? Twin girls. We have never had such luck in our family. What were their names?
They have their father's surname, Wang, and their given names are Chun Yu and Chun Hua. One means spring rain and the other means spring flower, because they are born in the spring and of course rain comes before flower. Same order these girls are born.
I see Ayai nod her hair forward too, but it falls forward and stays there. She's breathing deeply, noisily, and she's asleep.
And what does Ma's name mean?
The way she wrote it in Chinese, it means long cherished wish. Quite a fancy name, not so ordinary like flower. The first character means something like forever never forgotten, but there is another way to write Suyan. Sounds exactly the same, but means the opposite. The first part looks the same, never forgotten, but at the last part it means long held grudge. Your mother gets very angry with me. I tell her her name should be Grudge.
And what about my name? What does Jing Mei mean?
Your name is also very special. Jing, like excellent Jing, not just good. It's something pure, essential, the best quality. Jing is good leftover stuff when you take impurities out of something like gold, rice, or salt. So what is left? Just pure essence and Mei. This is common Mei. This is Mei Nin, younger sister.
Think about this. My mother's long cherished wish, me, the younger sister who was supposed to be the essence of the others. I feed myself with the old grief, wondering how disappointed my mother must have been.
So why did she abandon those babies on the road?
I wondered this myself, but then I read that letter from her daughters in Shanghai now, and I talked to Auntie Lindo, all the others, and then I knew. No shame in what she had done. None.
What happened?
Your mother just running away.
No, tell me in Chinese. Really, I can understand.
He begins to talk, still standing at the window, looking into the night.
After fleeing Guilin, Jin Mei's mother walked for several days, trying to find a main road. She thought she could catch a ride on a truck or wagon to catch enough rides until she reached Chongqing, where her husband was stationed. She had sewn money and jewelry into the lining of her dress, enough, she thought, to barter rides all the way. By the third day, she had traded nothing. The roads were filled with people, everybody running and begging for rides from passing trucks. The trucks rushed by, afraid to stop. So, she found no rides, only the start of dysentery pains in her stomach. Her shoulders ache from the two babies swinging from scarf slings. Blisters grew on her palms from holding two leather suitcases. She left the suitcases behind, keeping only the food and a few clothes. Later, she also dropped the bags of wheat flour and rice and kept walking like this for many miles until she was delirious with pain and fever. Finally, there was not one more step left in her body. She didn't have the strength to carry those babies any further. She knew she would die of her sickness, or perhaps from thirst, from starvation, or from the Japanese. She saw a family with 3 young children in a cart going by. She begged for them to take her babies, but they stared back with empty eyes and never stopped. She saw another person pass and called out again. This time, a man turned around, and he had such a terrible expression, looked like death itself. She shivered and looked away. When the road grew quiet, she tore open the lining of her dress and stuffed jewelry under the shirt of one baby and money under the other. She reached into her pocket and drew out the photos of her family, the picture of her father and mother, the picture of herself and her husband on their wedding day. And she wrote on the back of each the names of the babies and this same message: please care for these babies with the money and valuables provided. When it is safe to come, if you bring them to Shanghai, 9 Wei Cheng Lu and Li family will be glad to give you a generous reward. Li Suyan and Wang Fuji. She touched each baby's cheek and told her not to cry. Without looking back, she walked down the road, stumbling and crying, thinking only of this one last hope, that her daughters will be found by a kind-hearted person who would care for them. She would not allow herself to imagine anything else. She did not remember how far she walked, which direction she went, when she fainted, or when she was found. When she awoke, she was in the back of a bouncing truck with several other sick people, all moaning. The face of an American missionary lady bent over and smiled, talking to her in a soothing language she did not understand. She had been saved for no good reason, and it was too late to go back and save her babies. When she arrived in Chongqing, she learned her husband had died. She laughed when the officers told her this news. She was so delirious with madness and disease. To come so far, to lose so much, and to find nothing. Met in a hospital, Canning Wu and her were lying on a cot, hardly able to move. Her dysentery had drained her so thin. She was talking to herself, mumbling about her clothes. She had on a rather unusual dress of wartime. It was silk satin, quite dirty, but there was no doubt it was a beautiful dress. Telling Canning to her face, he saw her dusty, hollow cheeks, her eyes shining black, referring to her hope as foolish. She thought she had lost everything except those 2 things, and wonders which would she lose next, clothes or hope. It was an old peasant woman who found them. They were still sitting obediently near where your mother had left them, the woman Mei Ching and her husband Mei Han live in the stone cave. The Meis would come out of their cave every few days and forage for food supplies left on the road. So one day they took back to their cave a delicately painted set of rice bowls. Another day a little footstool with a velvet cushion and 2 new wedding blankets, and once it was your sister's. They were pious people, Muslims who believed the twin babies were a sign of double luck, and they were sure of this when later in the evening they discovered how valuable the babies were. And while they admired the pictures, knowing the babies came from a good family, neither of them could read or write. It was writing on the back. By then, she loved these baby girls like their own. In 1952, the twins were already 8 years old, and Mei Qing now decided it was time to find your sister's true family. She showed the girls the picture of their mother and told them they had been born into a great family, and she would take them back to see their true mother and grandparents. Of course, when she found the place at 9 Wing Cheng Lu and the old French concession, it was something completely different. It was the site of a factory building, recently constructed, and none of the workers knew what had become of the family whose house had burnt down on that spot. Mei Qing could not have known that your mother and I, her new husband, had already returned at that same place in 1945 in hopes of finding both her family and her daughters. Canning and Suyang stayed in China until 1947. We went to many different cities, back to Quinlan, to Changsha, as far as South Coming. Later, she went to Hong Kong, and when they finally left in 1942 for the United States, she was even looking for them on the boat. But when they arrived, she no longer talked about them. Canning thought they have died in her heart. When letters could be openly exchanged between China and the United States, she wrote immediately to old friends in Shanghai and Quinlan. But of course, by then, all the street names had changed. Some people had died, others had moved away. It took many years to find a contact, but every year your mother wrote 2 different people. She got a big idea in her head to go to China and find them herself. Canning, we should go, before it's too late, before we are too old. So when they said it was too late, that must have put a terrible thought in her head that her daughters might be dead. Canning believes it was the mother's dead spirit who guided her Shanghite schoolmates to find her daughters. After the mother died, the schoolmates saw the sisters, by chance, while shopping for shoes. She said it was like a dream, seeing these 2 women who looked so much alike moving down the stairs together. There was something about their facial expressions that reminded the schoolmate of your mother. She quickly walked over to them and called their names, which of course they did not recognize at first, but Mei Ching had changed their names. Are you not Wang Chu? Wang Chu Yu and Wang Chu Hua? And then the women became very excited because they remembered the names written on the back of an old photo.
At the airport, after shaking hands with everybody, waving goodbye, AI smiles at me as we wait for our gate to be called. I put one arm around her, and then it's time. As we goodbye one more time and enter the waiting area, the plane takes off. How can I describe them in my broken Chinese about our mother's life? Where should I begin?
Wake up, we are here.
I awake with my heart pounding in my throat. I look out the window and it's gray outside. And now I'm walking down the steps of the plane. If only my mother had lived long enough to be the one walking toward them. Somebody shouts, and then I see her. Her short hair, her small body, and that same look on her face. And I know it's not my mother, yet it is the same look she had when I was 5 and had disappeared all afternoon. And now I see her again, 2 of her, waving, and in one hand there's a photo, the Polaroid I sent them. As soon as I get beyond the gate, we run toward each other, all 3 of us embracing all hesitations and expectations forgotten.
Mama, Mama.
Meme Jandel. Little sisters have grown up. I look at their faces again, and I see no trace of my mother in them. Yet they still look familiar, and now I also see what part of me is Chinese. It is so obvious. It is my family. It is in my blood. After all these years, it can finally be let go. And although we don't speak, I know we all see it. Together we look like our mother, her same eyes, her same mouth open, and surprised to see at last her long cherished wish.